Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Let's talk about the catastrophe Pakistan has been gripped with since the month of July and August. Records and massive monsoon downpours have been recorded in Pakistan in these months that resulted in massive deluge which have impacted Pakistan's economy, rendering huge blow to infrastructure, standing crops and people's livelihoods as well, and people have lost lives as well. A recent assessment by the National Flood Response Coordination Center says that the damages incurred because of these massive floods could touch a neck-breaking amount of around $40 billion. At the same time, there is a hope that has been expressed by Finance Minister Mr. Ismail. He says that Pakistan won't default absolutely on debt obligations in particular, and the economic situation in the coming 2 to 3 weeks will certainly improve. At the same time, there is a fear which has been expressed by the Finance Ministry that if the damages could exceed $40 billion, it could have an impact on inflation, which could rise up to 30%, and the economy could contract in the country as well. At the same time, as similarly, the GDP growth rate could also turn negative. At the same time, we see international community coming to the fore in order to help Pakistan for this relief and rehabilitation in the flood affected areas. Now Asian Development Bank has announced that it is quickly working for a special package for Pakistan for relief and rehabilitation. Today we saw a United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres in his inaugural address at the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly. He has urged the international organizations of the industrialized nations in order to improve on those mechanisms that could actually give the debt relief to the developing countries, and they should also put in those mechanisms for the debt reduction of the developing countries. Let's talk about the economic impact of the recent devastating floods on Pakistan, and what could be the possibilities, what possible mechanisms could be put in place, especially when it comes to the debt burden that is Pakistan is facing over the last many years, in particular when we talk about the last couple of years, because the debt burden has increased manifold. Let's introduce our guests. Today we are joined in the studio by Mr. Fahim Sardar. He is Senior Policy Specialist, Strategic Policy Planning Cell. Thank you very much for your time, for being on Views on News. We are also being joined by Mr. Tahir Abbas on phone line. He is Head of Research, Arif Habib Limited. Let's begin the discussion with you, Mr. Sardar. We have seen that UN Chief Antonio Guterres has asked the world community, especially the developed countries, in order to chalk out and put in place that mechanism for the debt relief and debt reduction for the countries such as Pakistan, which are under stress because of the climatic phenomenon that have wreaked havoc over the last couple of weeks here.
Yes, thank you for having me. Yes, that is true. The United Nations is now pressing developed countries, lending countries to be more precise, countries that are that are known to lend to the world and to the World Bank and to the IMF themselves, that they should basically reschedule these loans, that they should extend the repayments, they should make terms more lenient, and if nothing else, give a grace period to Pakistan and other countries, especially Pakistan, for given the burden that is there. Now, a rough estimate is that every year you need around about $10 billion worth of refinancing. So Pakistan will be looking towards a little bit more than that, because we cannot, at this moment, we cannot afford to repay the debts and to absorb the $30 to $40 billion loss that we've incurred due to the floods. These floods have been caused by rains that were 3 times more than the average. So I mean, in a slightly tight situation, but if the United Nations can support Pakistan to get this done, it can give us some financial breathing space so that we can at least, for the next 12 months, we can sort of press out some recovery programs.
Okay, let's include another participant in the show, Dr. Hakan Najib, who is a former advisor, Ministry of Finance. Dr. Najib, thank you very much for joining in the show today. So there is a statement by United Nations Secretary General regarding the mechanism that should be put in place for the developing countries for debt relief and debt reduction. How significant this statement, especially on the occasion of the United Nations General Assembly session, is, and do you think the countries which are lending these debts to the developing countries would give a heed to this statement?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you for having me on your show. It's always a pleasure to be on PTV. So let me put it this way. If you compare the response that we saw in 2010 to the response that we are seeing now, it is good. Lots of countries have come forth, but the overall quantum of the response is weak. The reason being, you have to remember, there is a fatigue in the international community as well to do this kind of work. You know, you had COVID, now you have a slowing global economy, and then you have Ukraine. So resources are tied up. They are also going through an energy shock. So in all that, the response to date has been on the weaker side than the kind of damage that we have taken, which you rightly keep pointing out, to the north of $30 billion, whereas our whole thing in this is about 1% when it comes to carbon emissions. So we have to build this narrative. Now, coming back to what kind of debt relief can one expect? We have debts which are bilateral in nature. Of course, we have had this, for example, the Paris Club did this about $12 billion a long time ago. When it came to COVID, we had $3.2 billion in deferment. And also IMF gave $1.4 billion. So these are the prior examples of how this has happened. I think the first and foremost to start would be new monies that must flow in before we can go through this process. And the first one, for example, easily could have been the rapid financing instrument that the IMF has, through which they gave $1.4 billion during COVID. Some monies can come in. This is non-conditionality based, so that's an easy one. World Bank has done some reappropriation. I think they can do much more. As I'm hearing, by the 15th of October, they will have a report on Pakistan. I can share parts of it with you. They think the growth is going to drop to around 1.5%. Inflation is going to rise beyond 25%. So they have a serious assessment of a serious damage that has been done to agriculture, and you can see the ramifications in the industry as well. So the World Bank should be coming with that. There is a counter-cyclical facility of $1.5 billion that ADB is thinking about. I think by the end of October, we should have that. It's LIBOR plus 0.75%. The rate is a little on the higher side, because it's not a project loan, it's a 7-year loan, but again, no conditionalities, so that's something that isn't there in the offering. So I've put 3 very categorical proposals in front of you. Then you can now think of the bilaterals, rescheduling some part.
Dr. Najib, your point is well taken. Very elaborately you've put forth these 3 points. Now let's go back to this particular, the difference between, as you already mentioned, that the global economy was under stress already, mainly because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now the response hasn't been as same as it was back in 2010. So this is the one aspect, that the money or the aid coming into Pakistan. Debt relief or debt reduction is a different aspect. Which is more important at this time for Pakistan, either the money coming in form of the aid, or the debt relief or reduction?
So in the immediate, the money coming in is very important. And the reason I say that is that Pakistan needs $21 billion of gross financing needs just to pay off its debts and the interest in FY23. Now, let me repeat, this $21 billion is pre-flood, and it's a heavy toll on Pakistan. Going to the IMF, going to our friendly countries, we were already striving very hard to get this 21 billion here, and then we needed another about $10 billion in terms of the current account deficit that we were running. So we were trying to get to these $31 billion, and now our needs have escalated. And why do I say that? Our imports, we were estimating at $69 billion. My sense is they will go up. So let me put a figure to you why I say this. I was looking at the August food import. Our food import bill has gone to about $1 billion. Our food import bill usually hovers around $500 to $700 million. But we need wheat, we need lentils, we need onions, we need tomatoes. All in all, we need higher amounts, and we could see that in the August bill. So immediately we need some new funding that should come in to support our budgetary position. We need some new funding to come in so that we can use this support to pay off immediately what we've paid about 103 billion, or are in the process of taking 103 billion rupees to the people of Pakistan, so that our gross financing needs internationally are well met, so that we are a bit more comfortable. So that in the immediate. In the next 2 to 3 months, if we can do a proper DNA, an assessment of what the immediate building needs are, the reconstruction needs are, and that's where I think we need space when it comes both in the fiscal side, in the local budget, because we have agreed a certain budget fiscal with the IMF.
Right, so Dr. Najib, we'll come to this aspect of rehabilitation and reconstruction. There is a package, as you already mentioned, by the Asian Development Bank for Pakistan's relief and rehabilitation. We'll try to delve deeper into the aspects of that, the possibilities which are associated with that package. So, Mr. Sadar, what's your opinion? What is more important for Pakistan at this point in time? The money in form of aid immediately coming into Pakistan, or the debt relief and the reduction?
Actually, both, because we're in a situation where we have to pay back lots of loans, as Dr. Najib has very, I think, lucidly explained. I won't repeat that, of course, but we also need some cash inflows, so that we can pay for the existing emergencies, we can pay for the emergency food supplies, medical supplies, immediate rehabilitation, because frankly speaking, as every day passes, temperatures have started to drop. Things are going to get very cold very soon, and we need to put 33 million Pakistanis under a roof as soon as possible, even if it's a temporary roof. Right now, I don't think we can choose between either. If we can get both, that is what we need right now. But if I had to choose, which I think was your original question, I think we need to get immediate cash. That needs to come in so that we can at least deal with the emergencies immediately. And once that is sort of in a slightly safer situation, then we can talk to the countries about rescheduling. And as Dr. Najib was mentioning, that the loans that we owe, whether they're multilateral or bilateral, they will have to be renegotiated, come what may. So I think the Ministry of Finance and the government of Pakistan should be working on that on a war footing basis.
So what do you think, what could be the response of international community or the international donors when it comes to the statement of Secretary General Antonio Guterres? He said that it's not the matter of generosity, it's a matter of justice. Now, he has reiterated this very particular narrative and stance in his inaugural speech at the UN General Assembly today, that it's because of the G20 countries that are basically the contributor to the 80% greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
So do you think they would consider this statement and take it very seriously, and would think on the lines of actually giving a form of reparation to countries like Pakistan because of the devastating impact of the climate change?
The word reparations is very interesting, because I was just about to say that Pakistan should and must, and under every circumstance, Pakistan must lay claim to at least $30 billion from the International Fund because of this weather damage. We didn't cause this weather damage, but we've been affected by it. So the world should pay, as you have rightly said, the countries that are basically causing this climate change should pay for this, firstly. Secondly, when the head of the United Nations says something, it carries weight, but we have to take it with a pinch of salt. Why? Because the UN cannot enforce these contracts. These contracts are with other agencies like the IMF, World Bank, ADB, other organizations, but I'll deal with them and the commercial ones separately. The loans,
Mr. Devastating floods in Pakistan and the statements which are associated with this particular phenomenon of climate change that is wreaking havoc, especially in the developing countries, because of the industrialization in the developed countries of this United Nations Secretary General. We are joined in the studio by Mr. Fahim Sardar, Senior Policy Specialist, and also by Dr. Hakan Najib, former Advisor, Ministry of Finance, on Skype. Thank you once again, both of you gentlemen, for being on the show. So, Dr. Najib, when we talk about ADB announcing a package for Pakistan for relief and rehabilitation, there are two aspects to it which they have described: the short-term and the medium-term measures which they are going to take, and there is another thing, the long-term measures that they are going to take. So when we talk about the short-term and the medium-term, they said that their focus would be on rebuilding roads, irrigation infrastructure, and support the development and the financial stability of the agriculture sector to boost. As you already mentioned, that since the imports of the food items has increased, it is also burdening Pakistan's economy. Do you think this particular package by the ADB would help reduce that cost which has gone higher?
So both aspects are very important, right? Let's look at the infrastructure damage. So about 12,000 kilometers of road need rehabilitation. So that's our infrastructure work. And there I say our project funding should improve. We need to reallocate our PSDP. So project funding from abroad should increase, and PSDP is our developmental budget. We need to reallocate to building these 12,000 kilometers of road. There's about 374 odd bridges are damaged. So of course, to make sure that Pakistan's connectivity stays intact, we need to work on that. On the ADB money coming in, our key issue right now is that our supply of dollars has been limited and our demand of dollars has been rising and has risen further as we've hit the floods. This is a really important point for viewers to understand. Now, any flow of money in the immediate is really important for a country which is barely has $8.6 billion of reserves in the State Bank of Pakistan. This is a serious area of concern for the country. We were trying to build our reserves with the IMF program, and then came the floods and obviously the damage. And as I said, the immediate needs, the damage, the reconstruction later, all three put together. So the money is coming in from ADB and hopefully new money is coming in from other countries and the World Bank. These would become very, very important in taking our reserves to at least into a higher level, hopefully into double digits. But as I started the program and I put this to you, these monies are going to be there, but there is a donor fatigue, there is a bilateral fatigue, there is a difference of what Pakistan's geopolitical situation is today. The Afghanistan is in a different framework. The geopolitics of the world are very disturbed, the Ukraine war. So all in all, if we expect a very, very severe response, I don't think that is going to happen. So Pakistan has to start thinking what we can do on our own. And by that, I mean not
Dr.
only
Najib, beg your pardon for the interruption, but the statements by the UN Secretary General say something otherwise. Even if the donors are fatigued, if the bilateral fatigue is there, yet Pakistan is paying the price for the wrongdoing it has not done. So that is exactly what has been said and reiterated by the UN Secretary General as well. And today, interestingly, in his very address, he said that the current economic system, which was developed decades back, is to serve the interests of the developed countries, and it should be reformed.
So you must remember that whereas the UN holds different position, it's the Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, the ADB, which hold the key to money, and of course the developed nations. So UN appeal will obviously help. When the UN appeal came, I think we had $165 million which came in through them, and Pakistan will build a strong narrative when the Prime Minister speaks there, when our Foreign Office makes that effort, and certainly those monies would come in. But what I'm trying to put to you is that the kind of damage that we have, the kind of monies that are needed, a lot more would have to be done internally. Internally, not only by the government, but by the people of Pakistan, by our diaspora
What are the
abroad.
possibilities? Dr. G, what are the possibilities? What could Pakistan do internally?
Of course.
Because already our
of course.
economy is burdened, and yet we have the devastation caused by these floods. What could possibly be done internally?
Of course, internally you have to remember Pakistan is a nation which does a lot of charity. Our charity figures runs into hundreds of billions of rupees. So now this is the time to do charity. Whether you do it.
So do you think we can
relief
recruit
fund.
this huge amount of $40 billion through charity from within Pakistan?
No,
Is
you
it
can't,
doable?
certainly. But you also have to remember that this 40 billion figure that is being put, you're not going to need it in the next 6 months or the next 1 year. And this damage is not purely in terms of spending that you need to do. This damage partly is coming from the fact that there is an economic loss, the opportunity loss, then there is the need to help the people, and then there is a need for...
Dr. Najib, I'll come to this particular point. Please hold your thought over there. Is it doable to accumulate this huge amount of money, around 40 billion US dollars, which is almost an initial assessment of the damages incurred? Could it be solely done internally, especially through charity?
If we had to do it internally, all of it in the next couple of months, I think it would be very difficult. Even if we had to do it in the next 12 months, I think it would be difficult. But it is an estimate. And basically what happens is, with a certain amount of, let's say, startup, I dare use this term, startup funds right now, we can at least get the emergency connectivities, emergency food logistics back on track. Because right now Pakistan needs to restart its economy as soon as possible. You're going to generate funds internally in any case. As soon as the economy starts to pick up, it's going to take a while. But re-answering your question, generating $40 billion internally will be a difficult task. But at the end of the day, you don't need that money immediately. You need it in a staggered form. And perhaps we can, on a rolling basis, we can do this.
Mr. Sardar, there was an initial assessment of the damages around $10 billion. Then there was a revision of that. It went on to $18 billion. And then the United Nations Secretary General said it could be around $33 billion. But the National Flood Response Coordination Center, a couple of days before, has estimated it could be $40 billion. So it's an initial assessment because there is a lot more to come. There is an outbreak of disease in the flood affected areas. The crops have been completely destroyed. As Dr. Najib was already mentioning, hundreds of bridges have been swept away. So, I mean, more to come. So this $40 billion could be a very little amount. Let's go on a quick break, and after the break we'll resume the discussion from here. Dependent on agriculture. So the estimates show that 70% of the onion harvest has been completely destroyed. Similarly, rice, corn, and even the cotton has completely been destroyed in the flood-affected areas. Now, with a severe impact on these harvests in Pakistan, so 1/4, that chunk of economy has directly been affected. The farmers have directly been affected, and the livestock, around 800,000 livestock has been swept away. How can we generate economic activity, especially in the rural flood-affected areas? Dr. Najib, can you hear me, please? Mr. Sardar, how can we generate economic activity in the rural areas that have been affected by the floods?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is we need to immediately establish which areas have, I wouldn't use the word dried out, but which areas have experienced the water receding from the topsoil. Immediately we have to go for a basic plantation of things like potatoes and beans, because potatoes give carbohydrates, beans give proteins. The growth cycle is very small, very short, so they can grow very quickly. So we have to immediately make sure that our people get the carbohydrates and proteins as soon as possible, whether it's through these two or a permutation of some other. I'm sure PARC can figure that out very quickly. As far as rehabilitating our agriculture is concerned, it's going to be a long drawn process. Now here's another side to this discussion, which I'm sure a biotech expert can sort of weigh in on. This water that's come into Pakistan, it has sort of filled up the water table. So we need to sort of factor that in as well, because this is going to have some effect on our productivity. Now, here's my positive side, saying that this water table rise, or let's say the replenishment of the water in our soil, may have a positive effect on our productivity. Of course, we've experienced a lot of loss, but let's look to the future now. It's going to be a very simple process as far as mapping is concerned, in the sense that you can't do anything where the water is still there. We have areas in Sindh where the water is just not going anywhere, because it's a flat land. It doesn't have a terrain where it's going to flow away. So it's just, the water is just lying there. So we have to figure that out somehow. If the water is there's not much you can do about it. But from the places where it has left, we have to immediately start the plantation process. And I know this sounds a little silly perhaps, but the things that grow very quickly, beans, potatoes, so that people have something to eat at least. And we have to ensure that they're getting the right nutrients, so that we don't start to have a famine in the country. We have to work that out.
Right. Let's talk about the ADB announcement regarding that very special package for Pakistan. In the long term, they say that they'll prioritize projects that support post-flood reconstruction and strengthen climate and disaster resilience.
Yes.
So when we talk about this strengthening climate and disaster resilience, what does it mean at the very first place for the common man to understand?
It simply means that they're going to go for projects which have a multiplier effect, a multiple effect on growth, with reference to flood reconstruction from flood devastation, and also something that can add very quickly to the economy, because these projects will be adding value. It's not advisable to go for, what they've simply done is they have reprioritized the list to basically focus on projects that can sort of kickstart the economy, which can help industry, which can sort of get agriculture back on track. If there were some other projects, they're just going to delay them. But at the end of the day, I still feel that these agencies can be a little more generous than this. Why was there any need to prioritize this? Because other projects are also important. The other projects are not for amusement. They're meant for growth as well. So what they've done is, within the growth paradigm, they've just reprioritized certain projects, which is good. But there's a point which very few people are discussing. I have to bring this up. We have to bear in mind that the United States of America is raising interest rates. Dollars are drying out from even markets like Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Dollars are flying back to America for the higher real interest rate. So the world is going for this really strange reset, in which, for example, the U.S. housing market is about to collapse. I mean, we're not talking, you might be wondering, why am I bringing that up here? For the simple reason of liquidity. If all the liquidity goes into the United States, what will the World Bank, IMF, ADB, other agencies be able to do? Having said that, we haven't discussed commercial loans that Pakistan has taken. If those countries, those foreign banks, have loaned out to Pakistan, and they are now facing a dollar crunch, under no circumstances will they ever reschedule, because they can't afford to.
So in that context, The statement holds water by Finance Minister that Pakistan is absolutely not going to default, especially when it comes to debt obligations. It means that the government and the authorities are ready to meet those obligations in any way.
Yes, that's what what the government was planning to do to begin with, even before the floods came into
But
Pakistan.
after the floods, the entire scenario has changed. Yet he is sticking with the same line.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. We have to be a little cautious here because commercial agencies' loans will already come under pressure. When I say agencies, I'm talking about IMF, World Bank, ADB, so on and so forth. They themselves will be under pressure, but there is some flexibility there to reschedule, to give a grace period or do something. But I have a huge question mark on the commercial loans because those banks are already under liquidity pressure. So to what extent can they reschedule loans for Pakistan? We're going to have to negotiate hard and very quickly.
Right, Dr. Najib, what's your take on this particular thing? Because Mr. Sadar has alluded to the fact that it could be a possibility when it comes to IMF and the International Donor Organization as such, they could think of scheduling the loans, but when it comes to commercial banks, they are already under stress, so there could be a difficulty for Pakistan in that context.
So as I said, Pakistan's needs were about $31 billion. That's our gross financing needs for FY23. They are likely to increase, in my opinion, to about $35 billion. We need to pick up one, as I said, the rapid financing instrument from the IMF. We should also be talking to IMF for enhancing the facility from where it is. We should be, Project 8 is what we should be also talking to the World Bank, ADB and others. And in that, a lot of it depends on our work. Why do I say our work? Projects are in the pipeline. You want to rehabilitate a road, you want to set up a gas pipeline, you want to set up, the connections for electricity. So there's a lot of project money that you can get. If we increase our project pipeline, it will help. Then there are program loans. Program loans are loans which are given to the country when they fulfill a certain set of program agreed with the multilateral. So I think there is good money there that we can pick up. Then I mentioned the ADB counter-cyclical facility. Now, then there are some things that we have to do, as we did with the Saudi fund, re-roll the monies with the bilateral partners and with the friendly countries. So all these have to be put in place, and then you go to the commercial. So I think our commercial book right now is about $8 to $10 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Many of these loans would have to be again rolled over. We may not be able to roll over at the current rate, as Sardar Sahab was rightly saying. The Fed is about to increase its rate by another 0.75%. So when the Fed increases its rate by 0.75%, the loans across the world become expensive. Pakistan would have to roll over whatever is due in the next 12 months with the commercial banks or return and borrow, and that's just a small time period that we do. So we would have to do that. But you have to remember that Pakistan's capacity to borrow new on the Eurobond, this commercial is I'm talking about with the banks, with the Eurobonds, which also Pakistan thought would do, I think is very limited. That's the commercial part that I worry about. And the reason is because Pakistan's bonds are trading at a very, very high premium right now. Because Pakistan's risk premium is high, and it is high because obviously of all the pre-flood economic situation and then the post-flood hasn't helped. So once we are able to do all what I've suggested earlier, then we can get to what the commercial rollovers and the commercial new loans and the Eurobond market would look like for Pakistan. And that's, I think, 6 months down the road when we've put this all together. I keep saying this, that Pakistan is in a dollar liquidity crunch. It's very, very important to understand. Pakistan's dilemma is that we have gone short on the dollars due to a host of factors that we can talk about pre-flood also. The delay in doing the IMF program, the multilaterals, waiting for the IMF program, the current account running on the higher side. So a host of factors have put us there. Right now, we need to make sure that we get all these monies that we've been talking on the program, and ensure that Pakistan's certainty is created as far as this gross financing needs of the country are concerned. So that we
Dr.
say,
Idris, when you talk about the dollar liquidity crunch, there is another development by the Muslim brotherly countries. They have announced, and Finance Minister during his recent interview yesterday alluded to the fact that a $5 billion investment from UAE, Qatar and Saudi Arabia is going to be done. Do you think it would give a little bit of cushion to that dollar liquidity crunch that you're talking about? And would cause an inflow of dollars to an extent?
Absolutely, and that's where the hard work from us comes. As I said, you can do the project. So this is like a project, you know, you can prepare the 2 LNG power plants for sale, you can prepare the airports for sale, you can prepare other units that you have for investment, you can prepare the stock market, the OGDCLs, the SUI companies, the PSO, you can do the what we call SPOs, the second price offerings in the markets. So that's the preparation you have to do. I mean, that's good investment because it's foreign investment. It's good investment because it's not building your debt. It's a non-debt creating instrument. But also remember that this has not been easy to come in the country. We've been able to pick up as far as deposits are concerned, but new investment or foreign direct investment or the sale of our projects has been hard to do. And I'm hoping that some of this would come through and it would support our balance of payments position as long as we are able to do our work on our side. And you know, our system is very, very cumbersome and clogged, so we have to unclog that system, bypass that system. And
right.
There's a very, very severe crunch of dollars. And right now, you know, we have to think to be able to do innovative stuff. That may not...
Would you need to do some innovative stuff in order to meet the economic challenges and the dollar liquidity crunch Pakistan is faced with amid these devastating floods? Dr. Khaqan Najib, former advisor, Ministry of Finance, joining us on Skype. Thank you very much for your time being on the show. And we were also joined by Mr. Fahim Sardar, Senior Policy Specialist, SPPC. Thank you very much for your time at the show as well. We really appreciate that. With that note, we come to the end of today's show. Until the next one, take very good care of yourself.